Jesus is the answer for the world today. Above him there's no other, 'cause Jesus is the way.
Today we're going to be talking about summarization, and we're also going to be reviewing paraphrase. And then we're going to put it together in a whole system called the speaker-listener technique, which is going to be a method that you can use and that you can actually teach your clients to use to help them communicate more effectively. But let's focus just on this skill right now. And I want to use a little bit of an analogy, a story of when I was in the Air Force. And one of my jobs in the Air Force is I worked with a unit that was doing the programming for the Space Computation Center that keeps track of everything in space, and for missile warning. I wasn't on the missile warning side, but we had a major crisis that occurred because we had a system, and our system, the command headquarters in Cheyenne Mountain, would get data, evaluate the data, and then if there was a missile attack, they were to send a message to SAC headquarters to scramble the bombers. One day we scrambled the bombers, and the bombers were headed for the Soviet Union with nuclear weapons on board. And the only thing that saved us was a paraphrase. Because in order to make sure the system was good, the automatic system would just operate. But then a man had to come on the line and say, this is valid or this is not valid. And so the human person in the system called and said, this is an invalid mistake. And what had happened is that when they programmed this thing, they used the missile warning message as the line check. And an error detection unit had failed and put static on the line check, which filled in the numbers of missiles coming in. And so SAC had received a message that said there were so many inbound missiles coming from the Soviet Union. Now, what am I trying to say? You can have the same problem. The data that you're sending might not be received at the other end in the same fashion in which you thought you sent it, right? And the thing that's going to save you is going to be the paraphrase, where you do a short-term analysis and say, now let me tell you what I think I heard you say, to make sure that the line check is correct and we don't have a communication error. And then in the long term, we call it summarization, where you take a big chunk of information and you come up with a summary. And again, do you see those are line checks, and they're sort of the safety thing in your counseling. And so if you're not using that in your counseling, you might scramble the bombers. You might think this person just said they're going to kill themselves or something. And that's why we have and use in counseling a lot paraphrases and summarization. So let's take a look at that. So think of this as this is your safety check to make sure crazy things don't happen that should not be happening. Summarizing is integration of client behavior, thoughts, and feelings. We've gone through a number of things, and we'll be putting them all together today and eventually summarizing everything. What is it? A rather straightforward skill. However, doing it well requires deep concentration over a period of time. Can you see, if you're sort of in and out and thinking about other stuff and seeing how you're going to figure this out, you're probably going to do a lousy job at summarizing, especially if we're saying summarizing needs to include the feelings and the thoughts and the behaviors. Requires synthesizing a number of statements into an integrated whole. Now you might think this is easy, but later on when we do speaker-listener technique, we're going to find out how easy it really is for you. because you're going to get a chance to try it and see how well you can paraphrase things and summarize things in our exercises today. It proves difficult for some. Sometimes you get some clients that just can't seem to do this. But if they can't, what do you know? They're going to have major communication problems. And you're going to have to work on it until they can get to the place that they can really take in what the other person is saying to them and put it together in some rational fashion. It's what is actually being said more completely and fully. It organizes the data. It's good for both you and your client to provide a solid basis to continue. We're going along. See, what would happen if we didn't ever summarize or didn't ever paraphrase back, and we now have been with this client for 10 sessions? Pretty soon, all that data would just be floating around, and it wouldn't be organized together into something that you could really use and make sense out of. It helps to keep from talking around the problem. You can get lost and go in all sorts of rabbit trails and all sorts of other things instead of being focused. Especially important the more complex the issue is. If this person has 3 or 4 different major issues, do you think maybe you're going to have to get this together? What are our goals today? Understand how the skill of summarizing helps organize interviews and client thinking about problems. Define the skill of summarizing. Demonstrate the skill in an interview. Learn how to use paraphrase and summarization to stop communication problems. And of course, to practice it. What's the importance in the interviewing process? The key purpose is to help the client integrate behavior, thoughts, and feelings. The secondary purpose is to see if you've fallen into distortions. Maybe you're not seeing things right. To overcome confusion and sort things out. It helps identify the missing information. Once you put it together and integrate it together, there might be this big gap over here and it'll become very plain. Well, I know this and this and this, but I don't know this. And you're going to have to ask those good questions, right? Clarifies thinking and feelings. Recapitulates, condenses, and organizes. Sort of in a way, this is the skill guys sort of have, where they go to their cave and they sort of think things through until they get all organized down to that one-liner. And of course, this is the skill that ladies have by talking and talking and talking, and by that talking, they organize things and get it down to a more coherent whole of what the real problem is. At least that's for many ladies. Identifies relationships among key issues. This relates to that, relates to that. Validates feedback, that I really understand what you're telling me. Helps the client see their own distortions like a mirror. If they're saying something and I repeat something totally different back to them, what should they believe? Somehow the way they're saying it or they're trying to get across to me isn't working. And we got to change how we're doing things. Helps the client examine his own thinking in a condensed form. Helps to put it all together and verify all the previous skills. So this is going to be an integration type of thing. We'll have another class where we integrate it all into a whole plan and so on. But this is sort of integrates it all. Provides a crucial foundation to go on with the conversation. Should at least be done before the problem-solving phase begins. What are we saying? Part of problem-solving is, I need to understand the problem. Now we're going to go and solve the problem. I need to at least summarize it all and make sure we have the same problem. You might see the problem different than I do, and we go on to try to resolve it. What's going to happen? We're going to end up with a solution that doesn't fit the problem as you see the problem. Summarization is similar to paraphrasing and reflection of feelings, except it covers a longer period of time. It covers a broader range of feelings that have been expressed. It puts together a number of paragraphs, issues, or an entire session or sessions together. Can be both data or feelings or both. It should integrate both. Specific behaviors or things to think about as you summarize. What are some of the things? So I'm summarizing. Now let's get you into that and pretend you're doing it. First, use your attending skills. Please don't throw everything out that we just taught you for the last couple of weeks and think that, oh, I'm just going to think about summarizing here. No, you need to be doing each one of these things and building upon it. Note important behaviors, thoughts, feelings, repeated patterns, inconsistencies in feeling and fact, mixed feelings toward important people or situations, or disjointed information as data. Now that's a lot that I just said there. What it's saying now, there's certain things that you do as you're going along to come up with that summary. And so the big things to remember is you're watching not just for the behavior, thoughts, and feelings, but you're looking for patterns of what's going on. Is this person's sixth marriage and everyone has blown up in the same way? We had a record. A guy had 8 marriages, just blown up his 8th marriage. And they were all due to domestic violence, and it finally dawned on him maybe he had something to do with it. Inconsistencies in fact and in feeling. If the feelings don't seem to come along, if the person, is telling you, well, I was almost killed, but it doesn't bother me. And what does that tell you? Either this guy's got awful strong defenses, doesn't he? Or something inconsistent here. I'm missing something about this entire thing. Maybe he's still in shock, but I'm missing something. Mixed feelings toward important people or situations. A real key is if somebody is totally perfect or totally terrible. What does that tell you? There are other emotions here that are driving that person to see that person as perfect or terrible. We know there's no one that really has it all together or has it perfect. So therefore, if they come across that way, that's data you need to take and you need to put into your summarization. I'm picking up that maybe you don't want to deal with your feelings toward your dad, and that's why you're telling me he was perfect and that you growing up had a perfect childhood and you never had any problems. Disjointed information. They're talking about this and this and this and this and this and this. Summarize decisions with the information that led to them and to make it clear that a decision has taken place. Now, what I think I heard you tell me is that out of the 4 alternatives that we looked at, that because of this and this and this, you're going to do this. Is that correct? And you want to do that, make sure now it's clear a decision has been made and why the decision has been made. Time your comments and summaries appropriately. Don't go and put a summary in after the first 2 statements. It could be a paraphrase, but a summary, there should be a significant chunk of data, and what's the feeling you're going to have? I'm not sure we got this all straightened out here. Let me go and summarize it all so we have a basis to go on to the next thing. Sort of a building block here, and we're going to put it all together and stick it in a box, then we can go on to the next thing. Include frequent smaller checkouts to validate as you go. Those are called paraphrases. When do I use it? To begin a second interview. If we talked about a lot of stuff last time, when I begin my second interview, my second session, I can say, now last time we talked about this, this, and this, and we reached this particular conclusion. Now where do you want to go this time? Clarify what is happening, especially if it's complex. Provide smooth flow from one topic to another. Let's say they have 3 issues, or they come in. Sometimes I ask my clients what they want, and they say, I want to deal with this and this and this. When we're done with sort of the first issue, I think we're done and say, well, are we done with that? This is what I think we've done and what we've accomplished. Is that adequate? Now we can move on to the next item. When we get done with that, I'm going to summarize that. And then I'm going to go to the next item, and I'm going to summarize that. Summarize what has happened in the interview. It wouldn't hurt for you to end most of your interviews with a summarization of what is taking place, just to make sure you're on the same page. And of course, to bring together several interviews. Now, the last 3 times we've talked about this, and this is what I've got out of it so far. How about summarization with families or groups? How is that different? Well, it's even more important when you have a bunch of people involved, because what's going to happen? They're probably going to all hear things differently, aren't they? If you're doing any mediation and you've got several groups. One time I had like 8 people in my office, and we're trying to work on this one issue. And they all were pretty much at odds with each other. So what do I have to do? Frequent summaries, frequent paraphrase. And when I think you said, I think your position over here is this. Is that right? Now, if that's their position, then what's your position over here? And we're going to have to go back and forth between the groups and also between the individuals to keep this thing all clear, or it's all going to melt down in some big mess, isn't it? Summarize the complex interactions of the members. Now, I picked up from you, you're going to hate that person's guts. Probably wouldn't be that bold, but the idea is I need to be honest about what seems to be going on. You know, am I right? Is that what you're trying to say? Helps them better understand each other, especially in mediation. What's my goal? Or in marriage, what's my goal? To help them understand what the other one's doing. Actually, is a method we call Monday morning quarterbacking. That means that they just lost the game Sunday, and we're showing the videotapes of what happened. And the rules are, we're not trying to blame anybody, we're just trying to figure out what happened in your life, why you reacted the way you did, and why this person did that, and what they said, and so on and so forth, so that you can better understand what really happened here. And then, of course, we can summarize that all, and we try and pull it together and sort of integrate and process that stuff from the past. We need a beginning and an ending when you're dealing with groups. So at the beginning, you might summarize, now I think the reason that we're here is because of this and this and this. And at the end, I think that what we've concluded here is this. Would you all agree? Summarize patterns. What I see in this family is that the boys are aligned with the dad and the girls are aligned with the mom, and they're in a power struggle. Would you agree that that's true? Clarifying diverse points of view. Well, I hear Joe saying this, and I hear you saying this, and I hear you saying that, and I hear you saying that. Were you guys all in the same meeting? How do you get that? If summarization, what each has said, validates the individual's contribution. So you summarize, now I think Joe said this, and Mary said this, and Jane said this. It validates that they had a say in what's going on here. Amplify statements by examples. Okay, we made this decision. It seems to me that there's a problem here. Is that problem sort of like this? And I'll give an example. You know, how trapped do you feel? It's sort of like you're in a room with only one door. Is that the way you're feeling? That, by the way, is a model of suicide. They see no other options. You have to help them find other options. Watch for different reactions to the summary. See, if I don't get them all nodding their heads and all agreeing in this group, what do I know? We're not on the same page. We're seeing things differently. And then what am I going to say? It doesn't look like everyone's in agreement with this. Tell me how I need to change what I've said here to make it an agreement. What would you add? And I got to keep doing that until we can have a joint summary of what's going on in that particular group. Now we have a method, and I want to teach you that method today. And through that, we're going to use that as our second exercise. And it's called the speaker-listener technique. It comes out of a book called Fighting for Your Marriage out of the University of Denver. And it came from years and years of research. And it's a very effective tool that you can use, and actually as a counselor, you should be doing this all the time anyway. But it will allow the people to go home and do some of the things that you normally do for them in the counseling session yourself. And here's the theory. They actually took this large number of couples over 8 years, and they periodically videotaped them. And what they videotaped is how they communicated together. And then at the end of that time, they built this system, and they taught it, and then they had a panel. And this panel got to look at only the first videotape. And based on that first videotape, determined whether this couple was still married or divorced after 8 years. And they could do that to a 93 percentile. Just by the communication, they could determine whether their marriages worked out or did not work out 8 years later, simply by looking at this. And of course, then they came up with this method to resolve those communication errors in the hopes that they would save those marriages instead of having them melt down like they had. And basically what they found out is that there are 4 basic communication errors. The first one is escalation. One person says something, the other person's offended by it, they say something, that makes the other person respond, and back and forth, and they get more and more mad at each other until they're just saying stuff to hurt each other, and it turns into a real blow-up. And what it started with was something very small or nothing at all, or shouldn't have even been hard to resolve, but it ends up in a big disaster. That's escalation. The second one is discounting. And discounting is when you say to somebody, you shouldn't feel that way. It's discounting emotions or discounting ideas. Oh, that's stupid. How could you possibly think like that? How does the other person feel? Discounted, like they don't count, like they're not important, their thoughts are not important, their feelings are not important. What does that usually do in the area of communication? Shuts it down. If you're not really listening, you don't care what I think, why should I talk to you? Third one is withdrawal. Forget it, I'm out of here. If I don't physically leave, I check out. You can see it in my eyes, I'm not there. I'm thinking about the TV program I was dealing with, or I'm just not going to deal with you in this issue anymore. And the fourth one is excessively negative interpretations. That means that when somebody says something, let's just say the wife says, and you said that really made me mad. And the other person says, that does it, I knew you hate me. In other words, that they take it and they take whatever's being said and they look at it the very worst way instead of the very best way, and they see it in the most negative light that you can possibly imagine. So those are the 4 things they're trying to resolve. Now, in the theory, they use sort of an example, that of a nuclear reactor. If you take two isotopes in a nuclear reactor and you just stick them together, what do you eventually get? An atomic explosion. So how do they keep nuclear reactors making electricity instead of blowing the entire place up? They put in absorbent rods. They structure how much the isotopes can bombard each other. And so that's what this is going to do. It's going to provide a solid structure to the communication in a way that stops all four of these errors. Now, it's not for just general talking, it's for hot topics. When we have two isotopes bombarding each other and we're going to have a nuclear reaction, that's when you go to speaker-listener technique. Okay? So now here are the rules of speaker-listener technique, and then we will look at them and we will see how it stops all four of these things. Here's the first rule. You take something, and this something is called a controller. Now, when they actually do seminars on this, they hand a person a piece of tile or a piece of carpet, and they say, when you have the controller, you have the floor. It's supposed to be a joke. But the idea is only the person with the controller is allowed to initiate conversation. And they're only allowed to use I statements, and they're only allowed to make a couple sentences, no more than a paragraph, no more than 3 sentences. So as an example, they might say, I was really disappointed in you when you did not show up at the kids' ball game. And I'm mad at you. Okay, at that point, the other person who is the listener, not the one without the controller, is to paraphrase back in their own words what they believe the person has said. As an example, what I think I heard you say was that you didn't like it that I skipped out on the ball game to go to the bar, and you're mad at me, and I pick up you're really angry. See, that would be a paraphrase. Now, the other person then responds back. Well, that's not exactly true because I didn't say you went to the bar. You're not allowed to add anything into the paraphrase. And I didn't say that, but you're right. I am very angry at you. Then again, the person that has the controller makes the next statement. Once they get it paraphrased and the paraphrase is agreed to, makes another statement and then paraphrase. Another statement, then paraphrase. Well, when does this person get the answer? See, the second person isn't allowed to respond, isn't allowed to say yes or no, isn't allowed to do anything except paraphrase. Why is that important? So the person isn't thinking about how they're going to answer because they have no clue whenever they're going to get a chance to answer any of this. Eventually, though, the person that has the controller is going to want to have some sort of response, right? So then they say something like, they ask a question. What do you think about that? And then they take the controller, person paraphrases, you want to know what I think about this. They take the controller, give it to the other person. Now the other person is allowed to initiate conversation, and the first person isn't allowed to initiate any conversation, only paraphrase. So now this person gets to say first response to what the other one said, and they get to then initiate and take it whatever direction they want to take it. And whatever they see the issues as, and now the other person is doing the paraphrasing. Do you see that? And now it's over at this person. This person can take it any way they want to, as long as they want to, until they want a response from the first person. Then they give the controller back to the first person. And it goes back and forth and back and forth. Do you see that this could be fairly tedious? That's why it's only used for very hot topics. But let's look how effective it is. Let's take escalation. If you're using speaker-listener technique, can you escalate? You can't respond. All you can do, the one person, no matter what they say, no matter whether you like it or not, you're not allowed to respond to what they say, so we can't escalate, can we? Okay, how about the next one? Discounting. What if when you say something, the person who paraphrases it discounts your emotions or what you're saying? You say back to them, that's not what I meant. I wasn't feeling that way, and I wasn't saying that. You see? So basically, you work out any discounting feelings by the paraphrase. How about withdrawal? Well, part of the research they did, they had a question. And the question was this: why was it that usually the men were the ones that withdrew in the conversations? Not always the case, but they noticed that mostly it was the men that would just, I've had it, I'm out of here, or they would just shut down. So they took their video cameras and they went out to a bunch of little kids playing. And they noticed that women do something different than men do. When women are playing, girls are playing, and they have a problem, what do? They talk about it, right? How about little boys? When they're doing something and they have a problem, what do? They make rules. See, how would your football game go without any rules? Well, because they tend to compete, they make rules to resolve things, and girls tend to talk. So they don't expect the girls are going to be the ones that are going to drop out. It's going to be the guys. See, and if they can't make rules, what does the little boy do? He takes his football and goes home. Right? If you won't agree with my rules, so I have a chance of winning. And as for guys, women are crazy, They have all these emotions, and when they get in this whole emotional thing, you can't win, so you just take your ball and go home, right? And finally, excessively negative interpretations. If the one person comes back with a paraphrase that's excessively negative, what does the other one say? I didn't say that. I didn't mean that. And so to gain the idea how this goes and how it shuts down all of those negative communication type of things. Where do we use that in counseling? Especially between couples when they can't seem to communicate, and especially if they're in a power struggle and all you're getting is accusations and going back and forth. Then you teach them speaker listener, you have them practice it in the session until they get it down. Sometimes you find out, especially guys, sometimes can't paraphrase. And then you're going to have to work with them until they can paraphrase. And then you send them home with this as an exercise, as we're going to do today. And you practice it and practice it and practice it until you can communicate clearly without these communication errors. The truth is, a good counselor does all of that without thinking about it in every counseling session. You know how counselors operate? You get one person talking, and then they sort of paraphrase what that person said, and then now what do you think about that? They get that person talking. Then they paraphrase what that is. Then they talk to the first one. You see, in a way, counselors are automatically doing speaker-listener as part of their counseling session. But again, you can teach them this, and then you can send them home, and they don't need you, right? It's your job to work yourself out of a job, right? So that's good. So do you see how this particular thing works? And of course, what do you want to do at the end of that? A summary. Now, what I think we got out of this is this particular thing. Do you agree? Hand on the controller. and get a summary at the very end of this so it all puts the whole thing together in some concrete way. So now we're going to do some exercises. Remember that on these exercises, I want you to evaluate them by the sheets that you have. And then I want you to go home and practice this on other people at home. Because when you're doing skills, it takes practice. We'll also break into groups here at the end of the session and let you practice on somebody else here in the class.
So what can I help you with today?
Well, I'm really struggling with something. And there's this lady that I knew, and she was this super good Christian that just loved everybody, really involved in my church in a huge way. And she just died of cancer.
Oh, how sad. And why are you struggling with it?
Well, the Bible says that God heals us. And she went through 5 years of struggling with cancer, and she did better and did worse. And then just recently, they basically just told her, no, the cancer had come back. And she had her whole family there and everything, and she was believing for a healing. I'm not sure how many other people were believing for a healing, but she died. Hundreds of people turned out for the funeral, all of those kind of things. But, what should I believe? Should I believe that we really can be healed? Because she's a lady that had tremendous faith, that believed the same way I believe.
So let me see if I understand. What you're saying is that because all of you were praying for her, you had a deep faith that she's going to be healed, and she died. Now your faith is shaking. You just don't know what to believe. Is that what you're saying?
What's a question? I'm not sure I would go that deep that I'm totally shaken, but it's there's a question there. See, what happened? And of course, I don't want to say like, well, it was a faith failure, because we don't know. See, how do we answer those kind of things? Why do good things happen to bad people? Why do some people die and other people get miracles? What does that all mean?
So, if I'm hearing this correctly, what you're saying is that you really don't understand how this faith works. Why this good person had to die? Why couldn't she be saved if she's a good person? Why did she have to die?
Yeah, that's sort of it. And the question is, because how much more good should have she done? Because she wasn't that old. And she had a family, and she had kids, and all those kind of things. But I guess it's more than just this specific one. It's, how about life in general? How safe is it? How do I know I'm not going to die? Can I really believe that I'm going to be healed?
I think what I'm hearing here is that what happened to this lady has you really shaken. It has, your faith is kind of like not really deep right now, like you're struggling with what happens. What happens, why all these people that do good things died, and why all these people that do good things are still here. It's more like you're questioning life and death.
I agree. I wouldn't say my faith is shaken. I still believe in God, and I still believe that there's still a real understanding of what can we really trust in, or what can't we trust in. Do you see the situation is that I wasn't really agreeing with her, that I was really shaken because I wasn't. And so picking up the emotions and the level of the emotions, see, you were seeing more of a level maybe than where I felt I was really at. And that's what was a real struggle for you to summarize, because you kept coming back to that, and I kept, saying, no, that's not exactly where I'm at.
He's taking me around in circles. But then there's another thing here. more is my lack of appropriate English maybe. Because when I'm saying shaking, it's just not actually that I mean it's catastrophic. It's just I'm meaning that it's just in the back of your mind. I don't know.
Yeah, I understand. Yes. And so we have that too to take into account.
Yeah.
And sometimes and what we have to do there is we have to keep changing our summary. And you were doing well, trying that, you see, and trying to get something that I would totally agree to. And I wasn't being the most cooperative in the world. But I was trying to be honest with where my feelings really were on that subject. And see, what God says is, trust me. No matter where you are, because we seem to see that bad things happen to good people. And we can't sort those out. We might not sort those out till we get to heaven. That's sort of the reality of the situation. But the deal in the counseling is to try to make sure that you're getting and summarizing where the person really is. And that can be a difficult thing when you're trying to read their emotions and so on and so forth.
So you were trying to get clarification and understanding of why you felt discouraged for a brief second, and she was trying to get understanding to how to get you to open up more and get a little bit more clarification.
Right. And so we went around and around the circle some, and that's okay. But the thing is, you have to realize if your person isn't agreeing with you, then you're not reading it exactly right. You need to go back and try again and again.
If we get to a point where we're asking, the client is asking questions versus telling us how they feel about something or what they're struggling with, if they're asking questions, like you were asking, I'm kind of wrestling with this about, if we had enough faith, we prayed, and so on and so forth, can we, bring in scripture or life experiences or whatever, or is that another class?
No, yes, you can. You can basically, but the summarization would be then to have that interaction between the two of you, and then you would still, as the counselor, say, now what I think we've concluded is. See, one of the things that she could have done that would have helped her out a whole lot would have been to say, well, how do you see that? What do you think the answer is?
Okay.
She could have turned that back to me. See, and most of the time you want to do that. You don't want to come up and give pat answers. You want to say, well, some ideas I have are this and this and this. What do you think about this? Or what is it that you think about that particular thing? So you could have drawn me out. I know we're trying to do paraphrase and exercise and summarization, but you could have drawn me out to see where I already was, and it would have clarified things for you. Now what we're going to do is we're going to do speaker-listener technique. Okay? And the way it's going to work is you're going to start with the controller, which means you'll be the one that is in charge. And you're going to give me no more than 3 sentences, starting with I statements about how you feel about something or what you want to discuss or whatever it is. And at the end of that, then I'm going to paraphrase back to you. If I get the paraphrase right, then you're going to say, yes, that's what I meant, and you go on to the next one. If I don't get the paraphrase right, then you're going to say, no, that wasn't right, you're going to correct me. And I'm actually, in this case, I will actually do a few things wrong in paraphrase on purpose to show you how that works a little bit later on. Okay? So you have the control. Okay?
So I have to, in 3 statements.
Will you mean 1 sentence, 2 sentences, 3 sentences, and then you just stop, and then I will paraphrase back. Okay?
I have a problem with time management. Will that work? The problem that I have is I don't have enough time to do the things that I want to do.
So what I hear you say is that you have a problem with time management because you run out of time, you have more on your plate than you want, than you can actually have time to do.
That's right. But my problem is that I want to do more. That's my problem.
So I'm hearing that your problem is, what I think I hear you say, is that your problem is not only do you not have enough time now, you want somehow to be able to do even more.
That's correct. So, if I have I guess it's the right question. So if I have so many things, if I have so many things that I want to do, how do you choose if you feel like they're all already so important that you've obviously chosen them to do? How do you make that decision of what's important?
So I'm hearing you ask me is, if I have all these things and I want to do them all and they're really important to me and they're all really critical, so I can't really get rid of any of them, then what do I do?
Right.
Okay.
That's right. So
Now at this point you can give me the controller and have me respond to that.
And if I think I already know the answer, would be another thing.
If you think you already know the answer, you continue. You can say,
Well,
I think the answer is.
Okay. Well, I think the answer is that you need to figure out and hear from God that what He wants you to do, not what you want to do. The problem is that I guess more of the problem is if I know that's ultimately what I want to be doing, and then you really haven't heard from God, then what do?
Okay.
Just keep doing the things you're doing.
What I think I heard you say is you think you have the answer, and the answer is that you hear from God. The only problem is you're not sure you're hearing from God, and it might be your own head that is telling you to do these things. And so I'm having a hard time sorting that out.
That's right.
Okay? Now he is asking me the question, so now I am going to be the one initiating, and he is going to be the one that is paraphrasing. Okay? I understand your struggle. And we all have a struggle with making sure that we hear from God. And so I'm hearing that that's the real issue. Now you paraphrase back. And what I think I heard you say...
What I think I heard you say you're hearing is that we all have a problem with deciding or with hearing from God. It's a struggle with all of us. Is that?
Yes.
Okay.
I guess what works for me is that I have to try to listen to that intuition inside of me, and that ought to, that comes from my conscience, and realize I can't do everything.
Okay. So you have to understand two things, if I'm hearing you right. First of all, that you sit and listen to your conscience, and that you're hearing that, but at the same time, on the other hand, you're realizing at the same time, I can't do everything.
That's good. So one of the things I will do is that I will prioritize what I have to do. And then I will work on the first priority. And when that's done, I'll go to the next priority and the next priority, because I have realized I will never get everything done.
Okay. So what I'm hearing you say is that you prioritize them for what you think is most important, and that you just start doing the things that you have to do, or this is, I guess, the things you have to do, not that are most important, but the things you have to do. And then you just start doing those things until the day's done. I guess I can't ask you a question because I'm paraphrasing.
Okay, now notice, see, do you see? That was a communication error that he just did, because he tried to add in and tried to ask me a question, and I'm the one that's in control. Okay, and we can't do that or it will escalate. Okay, you see what I'm saying?
Okay.
But that was a good example of what what not to do. Okay.
So what I'm hearing is that you just prioritize things for what you have to do, and then you begin doing them from what you have to do.
And I take that even further, is that in the prioritizing, I'm trying to hear from God. The term we use for this is called walking according to the Spirit. And that means I try to block out all the rest of the stuff and just flow according to the Spirit as to what I think is most important that God wants me to do or I need to do. And then just do that. And trust that if I mess up, that I will get this, I won't have peace about it. Okay, now I did something here I want you to notice. Do you notice that I said too much? Mm-hmm. I think he's going to have a hard time paraphrasing this. Okay, we'll see.
So what you're saying is that the answer to one of the things that you do, that you found in your life, the answer to the problem that I have, is that you try to walk according to the Spirit, that then you do the things that you think you are hearing God have you to do, but in the meantime, you're listening for the or the nudging, or you may lack peace in your life or in that situation to know that you've done the wrong thing.
Okay. You did a very good job, even though I give you that much information.
That's a lot.
The only thing I would add is that basically if I don't have peace about it, I won't do it. What comments do you guys have now? What questions do you have about this? There were a few times that some things got added in that probably we accepted that we shouldn't have accepted because the paraphrase wasn't exactly right. But it was generally good enough. And of course, this wasn't a very hot topic, okay? If it had been a very hot topic, then sticking to the rules would have been much more important.
When you say you gave him too much information to paraphrase, you mean that you asked more, or you said more?
I said too much, and he's going to have a hard time tracking. He actually did a wonderful job. Most people aren't as good at paraphrasing as that. Some people you have to cut down to only one line, or 2 lines at the most. The much data I gave him, he did an excellent job of paraphrasing it. But if I gave somebody who wasn't good at this, they'd all be, I don't know, say it again, you know. They would not be able to paraphrase that much data. So you have to be careful. There's no more than 3 lines or 1 paragraph. And usually you want to use 1 or 2 lines.
So there are going to be times where you basically are repeating back exactly what they said.
You can. You try not to do that. You try and put it in your own words. Otherwise, just repeating back exactly the same words is not as effective as you putting it in your own words.
Jesus is the answer for the world today. Above him there's no other, 'cause Jesus is the way. Jesus is the answer for the world today. Above him there's no